The revolving door sighed like it was tired of letting people in. Warm air, expensive perfume, polished marble so clean it looked unreal. Every footstep landed soft, swallowed by carpet runners and money. Above the reception desk, a chandelier scattered light the way a jeweler scatters diamonds, just to remind you where you were. Maya stepped inside anyway. Her coat was too thin for the cold outside. The cuffs were a little frayed, pulled down over her wrist like she could hide her shaking hands. In one hand, she carried a small lunch container, hugged to her chest, as if it might break. In the other, a folded library card, old and worn, bent at the corners from being held too tight too many times. A drop of soup slid down the side of the container. Before she even looked up, she wiped it with her sleeve. Not because anyone told her to, because she knew what clean marble meant in places like this. Clean marble meant no mistakes. Clean marble meant people who didn't want to be reminded the world was messy. And Maya was trying so hard not to be messy. She took one more step. A woman in a perfectly tailored blazer moved like a door closing. Her badge hung straight. Her hair was pinned back so tightly it looked like it hurt. She didn't rush, because she didn't need to. She lifted her arm not to guide Maya, but to block her. The air between them turned cold even under all that warm light. "Stop," the woman said, loud enough for the front desk to hear. Maya froze. The lunch container pressed into her ribs. The library card disappeared into her palm. I'm sorry," Maya whispered, the words barely leaving her mouth. The woman's eyes flicked down to the container, then to Maya's shoes. Small shoes, scuffed at the toes, a faint smear of dried mud near the sole. Her lips tightened, like she'd spotted a stain. "Children don't wait in this lobby," she said, "and outside food is prohibited." Maya tried to swallow. Her throat didn't cooperate. I'm not staying," she said. I need to give it to..." The woman cut her off with the kind of smile that had no warmth in it at all. "Tire that off my floor," she said, her voice rising. "Now." A man in a suit near the coffee station glanced over, then looked away fast, like eye contact was a liability. A woman in pearls shifted her purse higher on her shoulder. Someone cleared their throat, and the sound echoed too loudly in the perfect quiet. Maya's fingers tightened around the folded card until it pinched her skin. She took a half step back, bumping into the glass of the revolving door behind her. The cold from outside pressed through, chasing her like it had been waiting. She looked down again, searching for the spill she'd wiped, searching for proof that she hadn't done anything wrong. Her voice came smaller. I didn't mean to make a mess." That's when a child's laughter floated across the lobby from somewhere deeper inside. A bright little sound, soft and carefree, like it belonged in a different world. At the far end of the room, a private elevator opened without a ding. Charles Blackwood stepped out like he owned the building, because he practically did. No coat, no visible hurry. Just the calm of a man whose time was worth more than most people's houses. His suit was dark, perfectly cut. His hair was neat. His phone was at his ear. "Yes," he said, in a low voice. "Send it to my email. I don't want a discussion. I want it done." He didn't look at the chandelier. He didn't look at the receptionist. He didn't look at Maya. He looked through people the way glass looks through light. Another laugh echoed. The child's laugh again, louder this time. Charles's jaw tightened. His free hand lifted to his ear, turning the volume up on his earbuds until the laugh disappeared behind whatever sterile noise he preferred. Then his fingers slid to his wrist. He adjusted his watch. Once, twice, a third time. Like if he could make time sit perfectly on his skin, he wouldn't have to feel anything else. Maya watched him without meaning to. Not because he looked rich, because he looked unreachable. The woman in the blazer turned her head and saw him. Her posture changed instantly, the way a servant's posture changes when a king walks by. Her voice softened. "Mr. Blackwood," she called, sweet as sugar poured over steel. Charles didn't respond. He kept walking. The woman's sweetness vanished as fast as it came. She turned back to Maya like Maya was the stain she'd been trying to prevent. "You need to go," she said, sharper now. "This is a private facility." Maya nodded quickly. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She didn't say it wasn't fair. She just moved, because she'd learned that fairness was something people like her didn't get to request, but the revolving door was slow and her hands were full. As she stepped into it, the lunch container tilted. A single drop fell. It hit the marble with a soft, humiliating sound. Plip. It wasn't loud, but it felt loud. The woman's eyes locked on it, and her whole face tightened like she'd been waiting for this moment. She stepped forward and pointed at the drop. "Look at that," she said, loud enough for everyone again. "You see what happens? This is exactly why we don't allow this." Maya's cheeks flushed hot, even as the cold from outside licked her back. "I'll clean it," she said fast. I'll clean it right now." She started to crouch, her little knees bending toward the marble. The woman moved again, quick now. A hand shot out and grabbed the lunch container right out of Maya's arms. Maya's hand stayed in the air for a second, empty and stunned, like her body hadn't caught up. "Don't!" the woman snapped. "Do not touch the floor." Maya blinked. Her fingers curled, instinctively searching for something to hold. Her palm found the folded library card. She gripped it like it was a rope. "I just need to give that to my uncle," she said, the word catching. "He's inside. He's sick. My grandma said—" The woman's mouth curled. "Uncle," she repeated, as if the word itself was suspicious. "You don't have clearance. You don't have a visitor badge. You don't have a file." Maya's lips parted, then closed again. She didn't know what to say to that. She couldn't invent a badge. She could only stand there and hold what little she had. The woman lifted the lunch container slightly, inspecting it like it was evidence. "And this," she said, "this is not allowed. Do you understand?" Maya nodded, but her nod wasn't agreement. It was survival. The woman didn't stop. Cruelty like hers didn't need anger. It needed an audience. "People pay to be here," she announced, sweeping her gaze around the lobby. "This is not a shelter. This is not a cafeteria. And you—" Her eyes flicked to Maya's hands. "What is that?" Maya's fingers tightened reflexively. The folded card was suddenly visible. The woman reached for it. Maya pulled it back, fast. The movement was small, but it was the first time she'd resisted anything. The woman's eyes narrowed. "What did you take?" she demanded. The word "take" landing like a slap. "I didn't take it," Maya said, voice shaking. "It's mine." The woman laughed once, short and sharp, no humor. "A library card," she said, like she couldn't believe the audacity. "Why would you even have that?" Maya didn't answer, because the answer wasn't something she wanted to say in front of these people, in front of marble and perfume and the kind of quiet that made your heart feel too loud. She just held the card, held her ground, held her breath. Across the lobby, Charles Blackwood slowed. Not because he'd heard Maya, not because he'd seen the spill, but because the woman's voice had risen to that pitch that carried, that pitch that meant someone was being embarrassed on purpose. He stopped without turning. His hand hovered near his watch again. For a second it looked like he might adjust it and keep walking. And that right there is when you can feel the story split into two roads. One road where Maya becomes another invisible child pushed back into the cold. Another road where someone finally notices. If you've ever watched a person get humiliated for something small, something human, something that could happen to anyone, you already know how your stomach twists. You already know how your hands clench without you asking them to. So tell me this. When Maya stood there with her lunch container taken, her dignity hanging by a thread, and that old folded library card pressed into her palm like a secret, who was that food really for? And why was she willing to be shamed for it in a room full of strangers? The private elevator swallowed Charles Blackwood and sealed behind him without a sound. The lobby noise fell away like someone had turned off a radio. Inside the elevator, everything was glass and brushed steel. The air smelled faintly of leather and clean linen. His assistant stood beside him, tablet in hand, eyes trained on schedules and numbers instead of people. Charles kept his phone at his ear. "Yes," he said. "I want the contract finalized today. If they hesitate, we walk." A soft chime as the elevator rose. He looked at his reflection in the mirrored panel and didn't recognize it as anything human. Just a man made of angles, jaw set, shoulders straight, a suit built like armor. Another child's laugh drifted faintly through the shaft, muted now. His fingers went to his earbuds again. Volume up, then to the watch, a small twist, a correction. His pulse stayed under control because his body had learned that control was safer than feeling. The assistant cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Blackwood, the board is on the line in 12 minutes, and the donor luncheon is—" "Email me," he said, without looking. The assistant's mouth tightened, but she nodded. She'd learned, like everyone else, that he didn't do soft conversations. He did tasks. He did outcomes. The elevator opened into a private corridor. No marble here. This was quieter, warmer. The lights were dimmed, designed to calm the kinds of people who paid to be calm. A nurse greeted him with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Blackwood." Charles nodded once. The smallest acknowledgement that counted as courtesy in his world. He walked past framed art that looked expensive and empty at the same time. He walked past doors with names on plaques. He walked past people with their heads bowed over paperwork. Faces pinched tight with worry. He didn't look at them. He didn't let himself. Because if you looked, you might see need. And need was an open door. He reached the conference room, the one with a glass wall facing the courtyard. Inside, men in suits were already seated. Their laptops were open. Their smiles were ready. Money smiles. Charles took his seat at the head without pulling the chair. Someone else did it for him. He set his phone down. He placed his watch in his line of sight like an anchor. Then he spoke. Not loud, not aggressive. Just calm enough to make everyone else adjust their breathing. "Let's begin." Outside the glass wall, winter wind bent the bare branches of a decorative tree. Inside, the air stayed perfect. He talked about acquisition. He talked about leverage. He talked about a deal that would move numbers like mountains. He moved through the agenda like a machine that had never been asked to love anything. But then, the door at the far end of the room opened a crack. A staff member leaned in, face careful. "Mr. Blackwood," she said quietly, "I'm sorry to interrupt." Charles didn't look up. He didn't like interruptions. "What is it?" he said, still calm. The staff member hesitated, eyes flicking toward the executives, toward the glass, toward the fact that she was about to bring dirt into a room built for clean things. "There's a situation in the lobby," she said. Charles's pen paused against the paper, just paused. One beat too long. "What kind of situation?" he asked. The staff member's voice went softer. A child. The word child landed like a pebble in water, small, but it made ripples. Charles's fingers tightened around the pin, just enough to whiten his knuckles. He didn't look at the board members. He didn't let his face change. A child is not a situation, he said. The staff member swallowed. The admissions director is handling it, but it's loud. Loud. Charles's jaw flexed once. The executives shifted in their seats. One of them chuckled politely, like embarrassment was contagious. Charles leaned back and pressed his tongue to the inside of his cheek. His watch glinted under the lights. He adjusted it again. A reflex, a way to stay in his skin. "We're not stopping," he said, voice flat. "Continue." The staff member nodded quickly and disappeared. The door closed. The room returned to numbers and silence. But outside in the lobby, something had already changed. Because the cold doesn't care how expensive the building is, and neither does humiliation. Back at the entrance, Maya stood half inside the revolving door, half out, like the world couldn't decide where she belonged. The wind outside pushed against the glass, making it tremble. A sign by the door read, "Entry restricted," in clean black letters. Maya's fingers were red from gripping the folded library card. Her eyes stayed wide, but she refused to let tears fall. Not in front of them. Not in front of the pearl necklace woman who kept watching from the corner of her eye like Maya was a stain that might spread. Not in front of the man by the coffee station who suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. The admissions director, still holding the lunch container, turned slightly so her voice carried. "You don't understand," she said, slow and patronizing, like she was explaining gravity to a child. "This clinic has policies. We have liability. We have standards." Maya's lips parted. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Her tongue felt too big for her mouth. Behind her, the revolving door pushed, nudging her like a hand telling her to leave. Maya took a breath through her nose, small and shaky. "I'm not trying to stay," she said finally. "I just need to give it to him." "And who is he?" the woman asked, eyebrows lifting with practiced skepticism. Maya's fingers dug into the card. "My uncle," she whispered. The admissions director tilted her head as if listening for a lie. "Name," she said. Maya blinked. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway deeper inside, as if she could see through walls. "Eli," she said. "Eli Carter!" The woman's mouth tightened. She turned slightly, tapping her tablet with sharp nails. "I have no record of an Eli Carter scheduled today," she announced. Maya's shoulders sank a fraction. Her body tried to fold in on itself, instinctively making her smaller. But then she stopped, straightened again, because she'd been taught something by life, and it was this: if you make yourself small, they still step on you. The admissions director leaned closer, lowering her voice just a touch, the way someone speaks when they want their cruelty to sound reasonable. "That means," she said, "that either you're lying or you're trying to gain access improperly." Maya's breath hitched. "No," she whispered. "No, he's inside. He is. Grandma said he's inside." At the edge of the lobby, a woman appeared. Older, breathless, a scarf slipping off one shoulder, hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime scrubbing, folding, cooking, carrying. Her eyes locked onto Maya with panic. "Maya!" she called. She hurried forward, shoes squeaking slightly on the marble. She looked out of place here, like her whole body was apologizing for taking up space. She reached for Maya's shoulder. The admissions director snapped her head. "Ma'am!" The older woman stopped short, chest heaving. "Please," she said. "Please, she's not doing anything wrong." Her voice broke on the last word. She swallowed and tried again, stronger. She made that herself. She just wants to bring it to my son. He's very sick. They moved him here because they said it was the best place. We don't have anyone else. The admissions director's eyes went cold. No exceptions, she said like a prayer. The older woman stepped closer anyway. This wasn't a woman built for confrontation. You could see it in the way her hands fluttered, unsure where to land, in the way she kept smoothing her own coat as if she could iron the situation flat. But she planted herself between the admissions director and Maya, not because she felt brave, because she was a grandmother, and love makes your body do things your fear doesn't approve of. She's a child, the grandmother said, voice trembling but loud enough now. You don't need to speak to her like she's something you wipe off the floor. A silence fell. The kind of silence that makes everyone suddenly aware of their own heartbeat. The admissions director's lips pressed into a line. You need to lower your voice, she said. The grandmother didn't. She waited outside, she insisted, her eyes wet. In the cold. She didn't complain once. She just held that little card like it was keeping her standing. The admissions director's gaze flicked to the library card again. Her eyes narrowed. That card, she said, pointing. Where did you get it? It's mine, Maya whispered again, stubborn now, like she'd decided this was the one thing they weren't taking. The admissions director stepped forward. Maya's body flinched. Her shoulders rose, her elbows tucked inward, like she was preparing to protect her ribs. The admissions director reached for the card. The grandmother grabbed her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her. Don't, the grandmother said, voice raw. For a second, it looked like the admissions director couldn't believe she'd been touched. Then her face shifted into something uglier. Oh, she said softly. So, that's how it is. She pulled her wrist free and turned her head slightly. 2 security guards standing near the hallway entrance straightened as if yanked by strings. The admissions director didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Remove them, she said. Maya's stomach dropped. The guard stepped forward. The grandmother's eyes widened. No, she said, backing instinctively toward Maya. No, please, we're leaving. Just let her give him the food. One guard reached for the grandmother's arm. The other reached for Maya. Maya's body locked. Her fingers tightened around the card until her joints ached. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The admissions director watched like a person watching a spill get cleaned, efficient, satisfied. And then, from deeper inside the lobby, a voice cut through, low, controlled, not loud, but it carried anyway because power always does. Stop. The guard's hands paused. The admissions director's head snapped toward the sound. Charles Blackwood stood at the edge of the lobby, coat still off, suit still perfect, phone no longer at his ear. His assistant hovered behind him, eyes wide like she'd seen a crack in a statue. Charles's gaze didn't go to Maya first. It went to the guard's hands. It went to the grandmother's wrist. It went to the lunch container still held like evidence, and then to the small folded card in Maya's fist. His fingers drifted toward his watch, just a reflex. He touched it, then stopped himself. His hand fell back to his side. He walked forward, slow. The marble reflected his shoes like it wanted to worship him. The admissions director's posture shifted again, sweetness snapping back into place like a mask. Mr. Blackwood, she said, smiling. I'm sorry you had to see this. We have a... Don't, Charles said, quiet. The smile faltered. He kept walking until he was close enough that Maya could smell him. Soap, clean fabric, Something expensive that didn't belong near soup and cold wind. Maya's chin lifted a fraction, not defiant, just trying not to disappear. Charles looked at her for one beat too long. Then he looked at the grandmother. Her eyes were wet, her lips trembling, her hands still hovering protectively near Maya like she didn't trust the air itself. Charles's throat moved. He swallowed. His gaze dropped to the library card again. "Who are you?" he asked the admissions director, voice still calm. The admissions director blinked. "I'm the director of admissions and security. This is a private facility and what I just saw," Charles interrupted, "was you putting your hands on a child." The admissions director's smile tightened. She was attempting to enter without clearance. She spilled food. "We have protocols. We have safety." Charles's eyes flicked to the tiny drop of soup on the marble, then back to Maya's face. Maya's knuckles were white around that card, as if letting go would mean letting go of herself. Charles spoke again, softer now, but sharper. "What is in that lunch container?" The admissions director hesitated, then lifted it slightly. "Food. Outside food. Prohibited." Charles looked at Maya. Maya's voice came out like a thread. "Soup," she said, "and bread. I made it so it wouldn't spill. I tried." The admissions director let out a sigh, dramatic and dismissive. "Mr. Blackwood, with respect, this is not the place for—" Charles's eyes didn't leave Maya. "Who is it for?" he asked. Maya's gaze flicked to her grandmother. Her grandmother's lips parted, but no words came. Maya spoke anyway. "My uncle," she whispered. He doesn't have anyone. Grandma's been taking buses. I wanted to help." Charles's jaw tightened. His fingers twitched once, not at his watch, at nothing. Like his body wanted to reach for something to hold and it didn't know what. The admissions director shifted, impatience creeping into her voice. "Mr. Blackwood, please, we can't set a precedent. If we allow—" Charles finally looked at her. And when he did, it felt like the temperature in the lobby dropped. His voice stayed quiet, but it cut. "Precedent," he repeated. The admissions director nodded. "Yes, we have to maintain standards." Charles's gaze moved to the security guards, then back to the admissions director. "Let go of them," he said. The guards hesitated, eyes flicking to the admissions director. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Now," he added. The guards released the grandmother. They stepped back. The grandmother's shoulders sagged, like she'd been holding up a wall and someone finally took the weight. Maya didn't move. She still held the card. She still held her breath. Charles looked down at Maya's hands. That library card, old, bent, loved. Something about it pulled at the edge of his mind. Like a door he'd boarded up years ago. He didn't know why yet, but he felt it. And the admissions director. She saw him looking. She saw the interest. So she did what people like her do when they sense they're losing control. She reached for the thing that mattered. Her hand shot out toward Maya's fist. "Give me that!" she snapped, the mask slipping. Maya flinched back. The card slipped. It slid out of her fingers. It hit the marble and skated across the floor, spinning once, and stopped. Right at the toe of Charles Blackwood's shoe. The lobby went still. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its breath. Charles looked down. Slowly. The card lay there like a fallen leaf. He didn't move for a beat. Then he bent. Not all the way. Not yet. Just enough that the crease of his suit tightened, and he picked it up with 2 fingers, careful, like it might burn. He turned it over, and the moment he saw the handwriting on the back, his body did something it hadn't done in years. His hand trembled. Not a lot, just enough that the edge of the card quivered between his fingers. His throat worked. He swallowed hard. The admissions director's voice sounded far away now. "Mr. Blackwood, that is stolen property. We can—" Charles didn't answer. He stared at the words. "Return it when you can." His eyes didn't shine. No cliché, no dramatic tear. Just a man standing very still in a lobby full of people, holding a piece of paper like it was the last thing keeping him from falling apart. And Maya watched him, not knowing what she just dropped at his feet, not knowing what she just awakened, only knowing that for the first time, someone important was holding her small, broken-looking thing as if it mattered, and the question hung in the air like a blade. Whose handwriting was that? And why did it make Charles Blackwood look like he'd just seen a ghost on polished marble? Charles didn't lift his head right away. He kept his eyes on the handwriting as if the ink had weight, as if the words could pull him backward through years he'd spent sealing shut. The admissions director took a step toward him. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, voice tightening, "that card is not authorized. It could be stolen. We can have security retrieve it and file a report." Charles turned the card once more. Slow. His thumb brushed the edge, catching a crease that looked like it had been folded 100 times inside a small pocket. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply held it a little closer to his body, the way people protect something without realizing they've done it. The grandmother let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped behind her ribs for too long. "Maya," she whispered, reaching for the child's shoulder again. "It's okay. It's okay. We're right here." Maya didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the card, on Charles's fingers, on the tiny tremor she saw and didn't understand. The lobby smelled like expensive coffee and sharp disinfectant. Behind the glass doors, winter wind pressed itself against the building, trying to get in. Inside, the air was warm. But Maya's cheeks stayed cold, pink from the outside, and her hand still looked too small to be here. Charles finally lifted his gaze. Not to Maya, not yet. He looked at the admissions director. His voice came out low, flat. "Give her the lunch container back." The admissions director blinked as if she'd misheard. "Mr. Blackwood, it's prohibited." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I said," he repeated, "give it back." A long beat. The admissions director's smile tried to return. It failed halfway. She set her shoulders like a person preparing to win a tug of war. "We have standards," she said, louder now, for the room. "We can't have people bringing outside food into a sterile environment. We can't have children wandering into restricted spaces. If we allow this, it becomes a show," Charles said, softly. The word cut. The room went still again, and every person pretending not to watch suddenly remembered how to look. Maya's throat moved. She swallowed. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, then closed again. Like she'd learned that speaking only made adults sharpen their voices. Charles's assistant stepped closer, phone buzzing in her palm. She leaned in, careful, the way you approach an animal that might bolt. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, "the board is waiting. They're asking if—" Charles's fingers twitched toward his watch. The habit almost won. He felt it. The old reflex. The escape hatch. He touched the metal, then stopped. His hand fell again. His eyes stayed on Maya's face now, finally. Maya's chin lifted a fraction as if she was bracing for the next blow. Charles's voice softened by half a degree. "Where did you get this?" he asked, and the question wasn't about rules anymore. It was about something deeper, something he didn't want to name. Maya's gaze flicked to her grandmother, searching for permission. The grandmother's eyes filled again. She nodded once, tiny. Maya looked back at Charles. "It was in Grandma's drawer," she said, voice small, "with the rubber bands and the old keys." The admissions director scoffed. "So, you admit it wasn't yours?" Maya flinched at the sound. The grandmother stepped forward, hands raised like she was trying to calm a storm. "It's ours," she said, voice trembling. "Not stolen. Kept. Kept because it meant something." Charles didn't look away from the grandmother. "Why?" he asked. One word. But it landed heavy. The grandmother's mouth opened, then closed. Her fingers twisted the end of her scarf until the fabric wrinkled. "I worked," she said carefully, "at a little school library, years ago." Charles's jaw flexed once, a muscle jumping, betraying him. The grandmother kept going, voice turning hushed, as if the lobby might punish her for speaking the truth too loudly. "There was a program, books for kids, a reading corner, little chairs. Someone paid for it, donated. It made the children feel safe." Maya's hands rose to her own chest instinctively, as if the memory belonged to her too, even if she'd been too young to remember it. The grandmother looked down at her, then back at Charles. "And then," she said, swallowing, "it stopped. The letters stopped coming. The books stopped arriving. The chairs got stacked up in a closet. The world moved on." The admissions director's voice snapped in, sharp as paper. "None of that changes the fact that you are not registered visitors, and your presence here is disruptive. Security, I need you to—" "Don't," Charles said. The word was quiet. It still stopped the room. The admissions director's cheeks tightened. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, forced politeness cracking. "With respect, you are a donor. You are not staff. You do not dictate admissions policy." Charles's eyes didn't blink. His voice didn't climb. He just asked like he was reading something off a page. "Is there a patient here named Eli Carter?" The admissions director's chin lifted. "That's confidential." Charles turned his head slightly, not to her, to his assistant. "Find out." The assistant's fingers flew over the tablet. The screen glowed bright against the dim lobby. Her face shifted as she read. The glow made her look paler. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, voice low, "Eli Carter is here. Critical wing, under restricted visitation." The grandmother's shoulders sagged like someone had removed the last pole holding up a tent. "He's here," she whispered. Her voice broke. "He's really here." Maya's eyes squeezed shut for 1 second. Just one. Like she was trying to hold the relief in because relief was dangerous. Relief could be taken away. The admissions director's mouth curled. "And that restriction exists for a reason," she said, voice ringing now. "No one enters without clearance. Not a child. Not anyone." The assistant hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Charles, then back to the screen. "There's also a financial hold," she said. The words landed like a slap in a quiet room. The grandmother's hand flew to her mouth. Maya's gaze snapped to her grandmother's face. Alarm blooming, fast. "What does that mean?" Maya whispered. The grandmother didn't answer. Her fingers trembled against her lips, the way hands tremble when they've spent too long being told no. Charles stared at the assistant's tablet, then at the admissions director, then back at Maya's small, thin coat. At the way she looked like she'd been trained to apologize for existing. His fingers tightened around the library card. The old paper bent slightly under his grip. He loosened it immediately, like he'd hurt something alive. The admissions director's voice sharpened, tasting blood now. "You see?" she said, loud enough for the lobby to hear. "This is exactly why we do not allow people to storm in with food and stories. This is a private institution. We do not run on pity." The grandmother's eyes flashed. Not rage. Something older, something desperate. "We're not asking for pity," she said, voice hoarse. "We're asking for decency." The admissions director's gaze went to Maya. It lingered there, cold. "You are bringing risk into this building," she said, "and I will not have it. If you do not leave now, I will contact authorities and report an unattended minor attempting unauthorized access." Maya's breath stopped. Her body stiffened. The words unattended minor hit like a threat with teeth. She stepped closer to her grandmother, pressing her shoulder against the older woman's coat as if that touch could make her invisible. Charles's assistant's phone buzzed again. Once, twice, a steady, impatient pulse. The board, the deal. Millions, moving like tides in rooms without children. Charles looked toward the private corridor. For the smallest moment, his body leaned that way. Habit tugging. The safe world. The controlled world. The world where he didn't have to feel the weight of a child's fear in a sterile lobby. His fingers drifted toward his watch again. The old tick. The old escape. He pressed the metal so hard it left a faint mark in his skin. Then he released it. Slow. The admissions director raised her chin at the guards. "Take them out," she said. The guard stepped forward again. The grandmother tightened her arm around Maya. Maya's fingers clutched at the front of her grandmother's coat, small fists trembling. The lobby held its breath, watching the way people watch when they think injustice is inevitable. And if you felt your own chest tighten right there, watching that child get boxed in by rules and uniforms, if it made you want to say something out loud, you weren't alone. Charles stood perfectly still. One step away from doing nothing. One step away from walking back into the quiet glass room where no one cried. One step away from leaving Maya and her grandmother to be pushed out into the cold. His assistant whispered, "Urgent now. Mr. Blackwood, we have 12 minutes. If you don't go back in, they'll pull the deal." Charles's gaze locked on Maya's hands, the way she held on, the way her knuckles went white, the way she didn't beg, she just endured. The security guard's hand reached for the grandmother's arm again. Maya's body jerked, protective, like she would take the grip herself if it kept her grandmother from being hurt. And Charles, he didn't move. Not yet. Not for a long, terrifying second. Not while the room watched to see what kind of man he really was. The security guard touched 2 fingers to the grandmother's elbow, not a shove. Worse, that trained, cold contact. The kind you use when you move something that doesn't belong. The grandmother stiffened, but she didn't make a scene. Her arms shook under her thin coat like the cold had found the bone. "Maya," she said low, "stay behind me." Maya didn't. Not out of defiance, out of instinct. She slid half a step to the side, trying to put her small body between that hand and her grandmother. Like she could become a shield just by deciding to. Her fingers opened in the air, then stopped. Because there was nothing to hold. The lunch container was still in the admissions director's hand, trapped there like a prize. "Don't touch her," the grandmother said, louder now. The word "her" landed heavy in the marble lobby, as if someone had set a glass bell over a child and begged the world not to shatter it. The director tilted her head. That thin smile returned. "Then walk," she said. "Outside. Now, before I make this worse." The sentence hung in the air. Make this worse. As if humiliation wasn't already enough. as if power was just a dial she could turn up for entertainment. Charles Blackwood stood frozen. A whole history had slipped into that little piece of paper in his hand, the library card, creased, worn, ordinary, and still. He couldn't let it go. The way his fingers refused to loosen, the way his wrist looked rigid, like his skin had tightened around the bone. His assistant moved in again. "Careful, like you speak to a man near a ledge." "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, tilting her phone toward him. "They're on the line. They need your confirmation." Charles didn't answer. His fingertip traced the handwritten sentence on the back. "Return it when you can." He read it without moving his lips, like he was trying to hear the voice hidden inside the ink. The director stepped toward Maya and crouched just enough to be at eye level. It wasn't kindness. It was theater. She looked at Maya the way you look at a problem that needs to be removed before lunch. "What's your full name?" she asked, loud enough for the whole lobby. Maya blinked once, then again. Her chin trembled, but she locked it down. "Maya," she said. Just that. One word. As if taking up space with anything more was dangerous. The director clicked her tongue, impatient. "And your guardian? Documents? Registration? Insurance card?" Maya's eyes flicked to her grandmother. The grandmother opened her purse with shaking hands, digging through small things like each item was an apology, a tissue, an old wallet, crumpled prescription papers, a keychain with mismatched keys, nothing that looked like permission. The director stood and her face hardened. "Unregistered minor," she announced to the guards, like Maya wasn't even there. "Make a note. If this becomes an incident, I want it documented." Maya pulled her coat tighter. It wasn't thick enough. Still, she folded into it like it was a house. The grandmother tried again. "Please," she said. "My son is inside. He doesn't have anyone else. Maya just..." Her voice caught. Her eyes snapped to the lunch container in the director's hand. Her throat worked, swallowing the rest. The director lifted the container slightly, as if it were evidence. "This?" she asked, laughing without warmth. "This isn't help. This is contamination. This is risk." She cracked the lid. Steam slipped out. Simple homemade soup, suddenly out of place in air that smelled like money and disinfectant. A few people turned their heads away. Others glanced quickly and then looked past Maya like she was furniture, as if even the scent was embarrassing. Maya stepped forward without meaning to. Her voice came out so quiet the building could have swallowed it. "It's for him," she said. "I made it the way he likes." The director snapped the lid shut. The sharp sound rang off the marble. "You didn't make anything the way it's done here," she said, turning slightly so everyone could hear. "Here, we do things the right way." If you've ever watched policy get used like a weapon, you know that type. Helpless feeling in your chest. The kind that doesn't go away when you look away. The kind that makes you promise yourself you'll remember her face. The guard tightened his grip and guided the grandmother toward the revolving door. This time, he didn't ask. He moved her like procedure had already decided the ending. Maya reached for her grandmother's hand. Her fingers caught the sleeve, then slid off. The fabric was slick. The world felt slick. Nothing stayed in her grasp for more than a second. Charles took a micro step, almost nothing. But his shoe against the marble sounded loud because the lobby had gone dead quiet. The director noticed and turned on him instantly. "Mr. Blackwood," she said sweet again. "This is an unfortunate inconvenience, but it's under control." Charles didn't look at her. He looked at Maya, at the way Maya didn't scream, at the way she didn't sob loudly, at the way she breathed in short, careful pulls. Like air was expensive here too. His assistant raised the phone again. The screen glowed with names, with urgent, with money that didn't have a face. "They're waiting," she murmured. The guard pulled the grandmother closer to the door. The grandmother tried to turn back to Maya. "Don't let go," she said, voice breaking, like she was apologizing for not being strong enough to hold tighter. Maya reached. She grabbed. Her small fingers disappeared into the grandmother's worn glove. For 1 second, they held. A fragile chain in a lobby that looked designed to break fragile things. The director leaned in too close to the grandmother's ear, saying it for the room anyway. The director leaned in too close to the grandmother's ear, saying it for the room anyway. "If this child has no registration and no authorization," she murmured, "I can make a call, I can file a report, I can turn this into a case." The grandmother went still, like the word had hands. Maya felt it before she understood it. Her fingers locked harder around her grandmother's glove, a small grip shaking, trying to hold the world in place. Charles's watch bit into his wrist, a red crescent, a reminder. His thumb hovered over the clasp the way it always hovered over the easiest escape. This time, he didn't soothe it. He unfastened the strap, slow, deliberate. Metal clicked once in the quiet. The admissions director watched him, confused for half a second, then smug as if she thought the gesture meant retreat. "Keep going," she told the guard, satisfied. "Remove them." Charles stepped forward. Not fast. Not loud. Just close enough that the guard's next move would have to go through him. "Hands off," Charles said. 2 words. The guard's fingers lifted away from the grandmother's elbow, hovering in the air like they'd suddenly remembered they were attached to a person. Maya looked up. She didn't look grateful. She looked braced, like a child who's seen adults change their minds mid-rescue. The director's smile snapped back into place, sweet and sharp. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "this is under control. We have policies, procedures." Charles didn't look at her first. He looked at the lunch container still trapped in her hand, then at Maya's face, then at the thin coat, then at the grandmother's trembling mouth trying not to beg again. "What's your name?" he asked the director. Her smile tightened. "Excuse me? Your name." A beat. The room leaned in without moving. "Marianne Holt," she said, chin lifting. "Director of Admissions and Security." Charles nodded once, as if he'd just confirmed a receipt. "Marianne," he said, calm as glass, "give the child her food." Marianne's fingers tightened around the container. "No," she said, the sweetness gone. "It's prohibited. It's a liability." Charles's assistant edged closer, phone glowing in her hand. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered. "The board is waiting." Charles lifted his palm without looking back. "Stop." His eyes stayed on Marianne Holt. "Give it back." The guard shifted his weight, unsure which authority mattered more now, a badge or the man who funded the building. Marianne's nostrils flared. "If you interfere with security procedures," she said, louder for the crowd, "I will contact authorities. I will document—" "Do it," Charles replied, and the quiet certainty of it cracked her rhythm. Then he turned his head slightly, just enough to include the receptionist. "Call Dr. Reed," he said. "Now." The receptionist froze. Her eyes flicked to Marianne, then to Charles, then down at her own hands as if they'd forgotten how to move. "Yes," she breathed, and reached for the phone. Marianne took a step forward, voice sharpened. "You can't—" Charles didn't argue. He made it public. He reached out, took his assistant's phone, and tapped the screen once. "Speaker," he said. A click. Then the clipped impatience of money filled the lobby. "Charles? We're on. Are you there?" Charles didn't turn away from the scene. He didn't retreat into a private corridor. He stood in the open, with Maya's fear inches from his suit. "Yes," he said. "Good. We need your approval. To finalize, no." Silence on the line. In the lobby, people forgot to pretend. "What do you mean, no?" the voice demanded. "This is the final—" "I mean, cancel it," Charles said, steady. "Right now. You're making a mistake." Charles looked at Marianne Holt holding a child's soup like contraband. He looked at the guard's hand hovering near an elderly woman's elbow. He looked at Maya's face. Too controlled, too quiet, too used to losing. "Then today I'll pay for a mistake that keeps my dignity," Charles said, and ended the call. The click sounded small. The consequence didn't. Marianne's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, panic flashing like a blade under silk. "You're grandstanding," she hissed. "This is absurd." Charles held his hand out, palm up, not pleading, final. "Give her the lunch back." Maya's voice surfaced, barely there. "It's okay," she whispered. "I can make another." Charles's head turned sharply, like the sentence had struck him. He didn't soften into pity. He hardened into protection. "No," he said. "You shouldn't have to." The elevator chimed. Every head turned. A man in a white coat stepped out, gray at his temples, posture unhurried, authority without theater. Dr. Reed. His eyes swept the lobby once and stopped at the only thing that mattered. A child boxed in by uniforms. An elderly woman bracing for removal. An admissions director gripping a lunch container like evidence. "Why is security touching a child in my lobby?" Dr. Reed asked, voice flat. "And why is my admissions director holding her food like contraband?" Marianne opened her mouth. Dr. Reed didn't give her the stage. "Marianne," he said, "give it back." She didn't move. Her fingers stayed locked. Dr. Reed's gaze didn't blink. "Now." Marianne's grip loosened, slow and angry. She placed the container into Charles's waiting hand. Charles didn't keep it. He turned and returned it to Maya immediately, careful, like the lid mattered, like the warmth mattered, like she mattered. Maya clutched it to her chest, breathing once, shallow. Dr. Reed looked at Marianne again. "Step back," he said. "Go to my office. Wait." Marianne's face tightened. "This is procedure," she started. Dr. Reed cut through it without raising his voice. "Procedure does not require humiliation." He paused, then added, with the quiet weight of command, "Look at her." Marianne's eyes flicked to Maya like it physically pained her. "Now apologize," Dr. Reed said, out loud. The lobby held its breath. Marianne's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I'm sorry," she forced out, the words scraping on the way up. Maya didn't nod. She didn't offer forgiveness like a performance. She just stood there, small, steady, finally being treated like a human being without having to earn it. She just stood there, quiet, small, unbreakable, finally being seen without having to earn it. Marianne didn't move, her hands curled at her sides. "You're siding with them," she said, too fast, too sharp. "You're letting a billionaire's mood override safety." Charles didn't flinch. He didn't respond. He simply slid the library card into his jacket pocket with care that looked almost ceremonial. Then he reached up and adjusted his cuff, slow, as if he was putting himself back together for what came next. Dr. Reed's eyes flicked to Charles. A quick question without words. Charles answered the way he always did, with facts. "With respect," Charles said quietly. "This isn't about my mood." He turned slightly so his voice could reach the lobby. Not a speech, a statement. "This is about a child being treated like a contaminant," he said, "because she didn't have the right name on the right list." Marianne's face colored deeper. "You don't understand medical operations," she snapped. Charles's gaze stayed steady. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He did something worse. He made it simple. "I understand decency," he said. The nurse lifted her eyes from the tablet. "Dr. Reed," she said carefully, "I have the file. The patient is Eli Carter." Maya's grandmother's breath hitched. She nodded quickly, like she was afraid the name might disappear if she didn't hold it in the room. "That's my son," she said. That's him." The nurse's eyes moved as she read. "Immediate family visitation is permitted," she said. "He's been asking for them." The words hung in the air. He's been asking for them. That was the kind of sentence that made a marble lobby feel suddenly too cold. Dr. Reed's posture shifted, not softer, just resolved. "Then this is done," he said. He looked at the guard. "Release them," he ordered. "Escort them to the correct floor," he added, "and do it like you respect them." The guard nodded quickly. "Yes, doctor." Marianne's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her authority had nowhere to stand now, no script, no policy that justified what everyone had just watched. Dr. Reed turned to Marianne again. "You will not speak to them again today," he said. "You will not handle patient families again today. You will wait in my office." Marianne's eyes hardened. She took one step back, then another. Not because she agreed, because the building had stopped listening to her. And then Charles did something small. So small, most people wouldn't notice. He turned to Maya. He lowered himself slightly, not all the way to a kneel this time, but enough to bring his face closer to hers without towering. His voice dropped. "Private." "Maya," he said, testing her name gently. "Is that soup for your uncle?" Maya nodded once. Her fingers tightened around the container. "It's his favorite," she whispered. "He always says it tastes like home." Charles's throat moved. He swallowed slowly. His gaze slid, just for a second, to the revolving door, as if he could see something outside that wasn't there. Then he looked back at Maya. "Don't let them make you feel like you don't belong here," he said. Not a motivational line, not a speech, a command, quiet and firm like he was saying it to himself too. Maya blinked hard. She didn't cry. She just held the lunch tighter like she was holding onto permission to exist. Dr. Reed gestured toward the elevators. "Come," he said to the grandmother. "Let's get you to him." As the small group moved, the lobby parted without anyone speaking. People shifted out of the way like they were making room for something sacred. A child with soup, a grandmother with shaking hands, a billionaire walking beside them, not in front, not behind, beside. Charles's assistant hovered close, face pale. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, "your schedule—" Charles didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He reached back and placed his watch into her palm. The weight of it made her fingers dip. "Hold it," he said. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. The elevator doors slid open again, warm light inside, a faint hum. The nurse stepped in first, then Maya's grandmother, then Maya. Maya paused at the threshold and looked back once, quick, not at Marianne, at the lobby, at the people, as if she was checking whether the world would turn cruel again the second the doors closed. Charles stepped in last, and as the doors began to slide shut, his hand went to the inside pocket of his jacket, pressing the library card through the fabric, like he needed to feel that sentence again. "Return it, when you can." as if something in him had been waiting years for someone to put that promise back in front of his face. The elevator started to rise, and the higher it went, the more Charles's breathing changed. Slower, deeper. Like the building was lifting him towards something he had been avoiding for a long time. The elevator doors began to slide shut. A soft hiss, a clean, practiced motion, like the building itself was trained to swallow trouble before anyone could remember it. Charles lifted his hand, not rushed, not dramatic. 2 fingers pressed the door open button. The doors obeyed, and the gap widened again, holding the moment open. Maya looked up. Her lunch container was still tight against her chest. Her grandmother's hand hovered near her shoulder, trembling like it didn't know whether to comfort or shield. Charles leaned down just enough to meet Maya's eye line. His voice stayed low. "Go to your uncle," he said. "Stay with your grandmother. I'll be right behind you." Maya stared at him like she was trying to decide if promises were real in places like this. Then she gave one small nod, the kind that wasn't trust yet, but it was permission to hope. Dr. Reed stepped forward. "Take them up," he said to the guard. "Now?" The guard swallowed again and moved with a different energy this time, not grabbing, not pushing, just guiding, careful, like he'd suddenly remembered he was touching human beings. Maya and her grandmother stepped fully inside the elevator. The nurse followed. Dr. Reed remained at the threshold, eyes on Charles, waiting for his choice. Charles didn't step in. He watched Maya one last time, watched the way she adjusted the lid of the lunch container so it wouldn't rattle, watched her fingers slide over the worn edge of that library card like it was a prayer she didn't know how to say out loud. Then the elevator doors closed, and the lobby felt colder the second they did. Charles turned back. The marble, the perfume, the quiet crowd pretending they hadn't been watching. His assistant still standing there, his watch heavy in her palm like a piece of him he'd removed on purpose. And Marianne Holt, a few feet away, already repositioning her face, already trying to step out of the story before it could write her name into it. Charles moved once, a single step, and somehow it was enough to stop her without touching her. "Marianne," he said. She froze. Then she turned slowly, as if she'd been called into a meeting rather than caught in a moment. Her smile tried to reappear. It didn't fit right anymore. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, voice smoothing itself. "I understand this looked unpleasant, but protocol." "Stop," Charles said. Then, quieter, sharper. "Now." The word landed like a door locking. The receptionist's hand slipped to the edge of the desk. One of the women in the scarf pulled her phone up a little higher, not recording openly, but ready. Marianne's nostrils flared. She held her chin up. "I'm doing my job," she said, "and I won't be publicly undermined because a family thinks rules don't apply." Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He only made her say the part out loud that she usually got to hide behind. "What is your authority here?" he asked, calm as glass. "And what exactly gave you permission to treat a child like a contaminant?" Marianne's lips parted. For a second, she looked genuinely confused, not because she didn't know, because she'd never had to answer it with witnesses. "I'm director of admissions," she said, too firm, "and I'm responsible for—" Dr. Reed stepped closer, voice even. "You are responsible for admissions," he said, "not humiliation." Marianne's eyes flicked to him. A quick flash of resentment. "Doctor," she said, "with respect." Dr. Reed didn't move his face. "You can save respect," he replied, "for the people you refuse to give it to. Silence thickened. It wasn't empty. It was packed with people holding their breath. Charles slid his phone from his pocket. His hand didn't shake. He tapped once, twice. Then he lifted it slightly and pressed the speaker. The ringtone sounded too loud in that polished space. 1 ring, 2, 3. His assistant's eyes widened as she watched his screen. Her mouth opened like she wanted to warn him. But no warning came. A voice answered on the other end. Blackwood Group. Evelyn speaking. Charles didn't look away from Marianne. Evelyn, he said, put compliance on. And legal. A pause. Mr. Blackwood, your meeting begins in... Cancel it, he said. Simple. Final. His assistant's shoulders dipped as if the words had weight. Her fingers tightened around his watch. I cancel, Charles repeated, slower this time, for the whole lobby to hear. Tell them I'm unavailable. Tell them I chose something else. Marianne's eyes widened before she caught herself. You can't, she started. Charles didn't even turn his head toward her. He stayed locked on the truth. I can, he said. The voice on the phone shifted. Compliance is on. Charles's thumb adjusted the volume a fraction. Not loud, just clear enough. Listen carefully, he said into the speaker. I am standing in the main lobby of Blackwood Private Clinic. I witnessed a minor and an elderly family member being publicly humiliated and physically removed by staff. I want full review of security footage, admissions recordings, and an immediate investigation into staff conduct. Marianne's mouth opened again. She closed it. Her hands moved to smooth the front of her blazer over and over, like she could iron out what was happening. Her eyes darted to the crowd, searching for an ally. No one stepped forward. Charles continued. I want Marianne Holt placed on administrative leave pending review, he said, and I want the Director of Patient Relations brought here now. The receptionist flinched at the word leave like it was a slap. One of the guards shifted his weight, staring at the floor. The other guard's face went pale. Marianne's voice finally rose. Not a scream, but sharper than before. This is outrageous, she said. You're doing this because a child brought outside food. Charles's gaze moved to her then. Not angry, worse, disappointed, and unblinking. No, he said. I'm doing this because you were loud when you had power. He paused, just long enough, then added quieter. Now you can be loud while you explain yourself. Dr. Reed stepped forward again, his tone clinical. Marianne, he said, go to my office. Marianne's eyes flashed. I will not be... Dr. Reed cut in. You will, he said, because you are still an employee in my facility and you will follow instruction. Marianne's breathing changed, faster, shallower. For a heartbeat, she looked like she might refuse just to hold on to pride. Then she saw the lobby, saw the people watching, saw that the room had already decided who she was in this moment. She turned, stiff, and walked. The heel of her shoe clicked too sharply on the marble, like punctuation after a sentence she didn't want written. Charles's assistant stepped closer, voice tight. Sir, she whispered, the partners. This is going to cost. Charles finally looked at her, and his gaze softened a fraction. Not warmth, just honesty. I know, he said. He reached for his watch. She tried to give it back quickly like it burned, but he didn't put it on. He held it in his palm, looked at it, then closed his fingers around it and slipped it into his pocket instead, like he wasn't ready to go back to measuring time the way he used to. The compliance voice on the speaker cleared their throat. Mr. Blackwood, they said, will initiate I also want a formal apology issued to the family, Charles said. Not a note, not a quiet email, a direct apology, in person. And I want patient family access reviewed today. He lowered the phone slightly. His voice softened, but only just. Because people don't come here for marble, he said. They come here because they're scared. The nurse with the tablet stood still, eyes bright, lips pressed together. She looked like she'd been waiting a long time for someone in a suit to say something true. Charles turned toward the elevators again. The numbers above the doors blinked, ascending, carrying Maya toward her uncle, carrying her soup, carrying her dignity like it mattered. Charles took one step forward, then another, and his assistant followed, still stunned, still trying to understand the new version of him walking in front of her. At the elevator, Charles paused. His hand hovered near the button, and for the first time, his fingers hesitated. Not from fear, from memory. A flash of old paper, ink pressed into fibers, a scent like dust and sunlight, and pages turned softly in a quiet room. He reached into his inner pocket, touched the library card through the fabric. Return it when you can. His jaw tightened, then released. He pressed the button and waited, because something inside him had finally decided. He wasn't leaving this story unfinished. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Warm light spilled out, clean and quiet, like the building was trying to pretend nothing ugly had happened downstairs. Charles stepped in. Not fast, not heroic, just steady. His assistant followed, still clutching her tablet, like it could tell her what to do with a man who had just detonated his own schedule. The doors closed, and the lobby disappeared. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the elevator moving upward, and the small, uneven breath of a child trying not to be noticed. Maya stood near the back wall. Her grandmother's arms were around her, but gentle, more like a fence than a cage. The nurse was beside them, hands folded in front of her, eyes soft, as if she'd decided her job was no longer policy, but protection. Maya didn't look at Charles, not out of disrespect, out of habit. A child learns quickly where eyes get you in rooms like this. Charles kept his gaze on the numbers above the door. 1, 2, 3. His reflection hovered in the stainless steel like a stranger. A man with a suit that cost more than most rent. A man with a pocket that now held his watch and a library card that didn't belong to him. A man trying to breathe without armor. The elevator slowed, stopped. The doors opened again. The hallway upstairs wasn't marble. It was carpeted, muted. A world designed to absorb sound. The kind of place where grief was handled quietly, where pain was softened by expensive lighting. Dr. Reed stepped out first, guiding them toward a door with a simple plaque. No names, no flex, just numbers. Inside, the room was warm, not cozy, not home, but warm in the way of clean sheets and low lamps. A private room with a recliner near the window, a small couch, and a side table that held a box of tissues that looked untouched. A man lay in the bed, thin, pale. The kind of pale that isn't about sunlight, but about time being stolen. An IV line ran into his arm. A monitor chirped softly, like a clock trying to be kind. Maya's grip tightened around her lunch container. She didn't run to him. She didn't fling herself forward like in movies. She took 2 small steps, then stopped, as if she didn't trust that she was allowed to be here. Her grandmother's hand slid down her back. Just a light push. Permission. Go. Maya walked to the bed. Her shoes made almost no sound on the carpet. She lifted the lunch container with both hands, like it was fragile. Like it was proof she could still do something in a world where adults failed you. The man's eyelids fluttered. He turned his head, slowly, and when he saw her, something in his face shifted. Not a smile, not yet, just recognition, the kind that arrives before words can catch it. "Maya," he whispered. His voice was dry, like it had been unused for too long. Maya nodded once, a careful nod. "I brought you soup," she said. Her voice was small, but it didn't shake. It had that practiced steadiness of a child who learned early not to fall apart in public. "It's not fancy, but it's warm." The man's lips trembled. His hand lifted slightly, then fell back to the sheet like it weighed too much. Her grandmother stepped forward and took his hand, her fingers wrapping around his like she'd been holding on to that hope for years. "My son," she said, not loud, not dramatic, just a word full of exhaustion and love. They almost didn't let her in. The man's brow pinched. His eyes slid past Maya, past his mother, and landed on Charles. Confusion first, then a faint spark of anger, weak but real. "What is he doing here?" he rasped. "Mom, who is that?" Charles stayed near the door. He didn't step closer like he owned the room. He stood like someone who knew he was a guest in someone else's pain. Dr. Reed cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood intervened downstairs," he said. "You're here because he made it happen." Maya's uncle stared at Charles, then at Maya, then back again. The pieces didn't fit. Not yet. Charles's assistant leaned in, whispering something about calls and statements and damage control. Charles didn't answer. He didn't even nod. His attention had narrowed to one thing, Maya's small hands opening the lunch container carefully, making sure the lid didn't clack, making sure she didn't make a mess, even here, even now. Maya set the container on the side table. Then she reached into her coat pocket. Her fingers moved slow, like she was afraid of losing it. She pulled out the old library card, flattened it against her palm, smoothing it like paper could be soothed into strength. The motion snagged Charles's breath. He didn't move, but something in his posture tightened, like a muscle remembering an old injury. Maya held the card out toward her uncle. "This was... Grandma said I should bring it too," she said. "She said it mattered." Her grandmother's chin dipped. Her eyes grew wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not yet. She looked at her son, voice soft. "I kept it," she whispered. "I kept it because I didn't know what else to keep." The uncle's eyes moved to the card, and when he read the faded stamp, his face shifted. His mouth opened slightly. He swallowed. Then he looked at Charles again, slower now, like his mind was walking through a hallway of memories. Charles stepped forward just one pace, not into the circle, just close enough to be heard. "I didn't know," he said. 2 words, not an excuse, just a confession. Dr. Reed moved gently toward the bed. "Let's give your body some room," he murmured to Maya's uncle, adjusting the pillow, checking the monitor. His hands were calm, human. A reminder that not everyone in this building was built from policy. Maya's uncle held the card in his fingers like it might break. He turned it over. And when he saw the handwritten sentence on the back, "Return it when you can," his throat worked again. A sound came out of him. Not a sob. Just a rough exhale, like the air had been trapped for years and finally found a crack to escape through. Maya watched him. Her expression didn't change much, but her shoulders sank a fraction, like she'd finally taken off a backpack she'd been wearing all day. Charles's hand drifted toward his own inner pocket, his fingertips pressed against the fabric where his watch sat, where the library card he'd picked up downstairs had once been. He didn't pull it out. He didn't need to. The words were already burned into him. Return it when you can. Maya's uncle looked at his mother, voice strained. Where did this come from? He whispered. Her grandmother's eyes closed, then opened. And when she spoke, it wasn't polished. It was real. A long time ago, she said, I cleaned a school library. Her voice barely carried. But it was mine. It was my whole world. I worked nights. Then I'd come there in the mornings because it was quiet, because books don't look down on you. She swallowed. Her fingers tightened around her son's hand. One winter, the funding was cut, she continued. The doors were going to close. The kids, they were going to lose the only place that felt safe. Maya's uncle stared at her, stunned. Mom, you never told me. I didn't tell you because it didn't change anything, she said. And because I didn't want you carrying it. She looked at Maya now, and her voice warmed when she said the next part. But then someone stepped in. The room went quieter. Even the monitor seemed to lower its voice. Her grandmother looked toward Charles, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid of him. She looked tired and honest and almost angry that life was so strange. A man came to the library, she said. Not in front of cameras, not for a ribbon cutting. She shook her head slowly. He came alone. Charles's chest tightened. His assistant glanced up sharply, as if she'd forgotten that a story could move without a press release. The grandmother continued. He sat at a little table, the kind meant for children. Her lips pressed together, and he asked me where the books for beginners were, like he didn't already own the world. Charles's throat moved. His jaw clenched. A flicker of something crossed his face, quick, controlled, almost invisible. But Maya saw it. Because Maya had learned to watch what adults tried to hide. He donated, the grandmother said. He kept the library open. She breathed out. But that's not why I kept the card. She lifted her hand slightly, tapping the back of the card. That day, she whispered, he checked out a book, a children's book. He held it like he didn't know how. Her eyes shone now, and she didn't blink the tears away. He turned to me and said, if I don't know how to be gentle, can you show me where to start? The words landed soft, but they hit like thunder. Charles's eyes dropped. His hands curled at his sides, then loosened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Because the room had just reached into a part of him he had buried under numbers and meetings and silence. Maya's uncle stared at Charles, and now the confusion looked different. Now it had edges. Now it felt like an unanswered question. Why, her uncle rasped, would you do that? Charles lifted his gaze, not to the uncle, to the library card, to the sentence, to the handwriting. I wasn't trying to save a library, he said. His voice stayed even, but something under it cracked. I was trying to save myself. He paused. His breath came shallow once, then he steadied it. I had someone, he added quietly, who believed books could make the world less cruel. His assistant's lips parted. She hadn't known that. No one in that building had. Charles's eyes flicked to Maya, to her small hands, to the lunch container, to the way she held herself like she was always bracing for impact, and for the first time, he didn't look away from a child. He let his gaze rest there, and he let it hurt. Maya's uncle swallowed. His voice dropped. Who? Charles didn't answer right away. He turned slightly, looking toward the window where pale winter light leaned against the glass. He pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose for a second, not wiping tears, not performing, just holding himself together. Then he looked back, and his voice came out like a vow. Someone I failed, he said. And I've been running from that failure ever since. Maya's grandmother reached up with her free hand and touched Maya's shoulder. Just a touch, a silent reminder. This is why we came. This is why you held on. This is why you endured the lobby. Maya looked at Charles, and for the first time, she spoke to him directly, not asking for money, not asking for favors, just telling the truth that had been sitting in her chest all day. I didn't want to make the floor dirty, she said. Her voice was small, but the room listened. Because when people think you're dirty, they stop seeing you. Charles's fingers flexed once. His eyes stayed on her, and his voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. But I see you, he said. And it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like responsibility. Outside the room, footsteps approached. Voices murmured, a soft knock at the door. The kind of knock that meant the consequences were arriving. Dr. Reed stepped to the door and opened it. A woman in a navy suit stood there with a badge, Patient Relations. Behind her, another staff member holding a folder, and a man with a serious face that screamed compliance without having to introduce himself. They all looked at Charles, waiting, ready to turn this into a procedure again. A report, a quiet resolution, a clean ending. Charles didn't let them. He stepped forward, and his voice cut through the hallway noise like a blade made of calm. This family is under my protection, he said, from this moment forward. The compliance man blinked. The patient relations woman straightened. Yes, sir, she began. Charles held up a hand. No, he said, not sir. He glanced back at Maya, then at her grandmother, then at Maya's uncle. This is not about me. He turned back to them. His voice stayed quiet, but every syllable carried weight. You will apologize, he said, to her. He nodded toward Maya, and the power in that simple nod made the air change. You will apologize in front of witnesses, he continued, and you will document the changes you're making so no other child gets treated like a problem. The patient relations woman swallowed. She stepped into the room slowly, eyes landing on Maya with the careful gentleness of someone who suddenly remembered what her job was supposed to mean. She crouched slightly, not too low, not patronizing, just enough to be on Maya's level. Maya, she said softly, I'm sorry. Maya didn't answer. She didn't know if she was allowed to, so she did what she always did. She pressed her fingers against her library card, held the totem like an anchor, and waited for the world to prove it meant what it said. Charles watched her, and something inside him made a decision without asking permission. He reached into his pocket. Not for the watch, for the library card he'd picked up downstairs. He pulled it out slowly, held it between two fingers. Then he stepped to the side table and set it next to Maya's lunch container. Like he was placing something sacred back where it belonged. Like he was returning what had been borrowed from the past. He didn't make a speech. He didn't explain. He simply looked at Maya and spoke the sentence that would become the heart of everything after this. Return it when you can, he said. Then he paused and added so softly it almost felt like a secret. And when you can't, I'll carry it. Maya's throat worked. Her eyes stayed wide. She blinked once, twice, and then, finally, just a little, she let her shoulders drop. The room didn't become perfect. The uncle was still sick. The grandmother was still tired. The world outside still had doors that tried to shut. But something shifted, something real, something that wouldn't go away when the cameras turned off. Charles turned back toward the hallway, toward the consequences, toward Mary Ann Holt's office, toward the meetings he'd canceled, toward the life he'd built to avoid feeling. And he walked toward it as if he had finally decided he wasn't going to hide behind marble anymore.